cancel culture.
Nazis on campus, yeah.
Real men should be more feminine.
Curious about the sign you got with the gender thing.
I want to talk about cancel culture.
Gotcha.
And how it works.
Okay.
Yeah. So essentially, cancel culture, I mean, I feel like in a very empirical sense. I mean, if you take cancel culture as simply being a reaction that is meant to effectively end a person's professional career, I would say that it has worked. And the first example that comes to mind pretty readily is, I believe it was a comedian by the name of Kramer, right? He played on Seinfeld, and I recall, and it was a very specific event where he said on stage,
The Laugh Factory, yeah.
yeah, he said on stage, like, he said the N-word, and his career pretty much ended there. And since then, I feel like Kramer's comedic career has pretty much never actually recovered from that event. So in that sense, I feel like cancel culture is very much it does work.
Okay, so when I think of the goal of cancel culture, I feel like the goal of cancel culture isn't necessarily to eliminate like one person from society. I feel like the goal of cancel culture is to make certain ideas untenable. That if you have like a certain belief system or a certain set of ideas, that you know the culture is going to come after you to kind of weed those ideas out. So what is Kramer's name? Richard? Is it Michael Richards? That sounds right. Yeah, Michael Richards. For his career getting canceled, like those are ideas that I think most people in society, like 90% plus, are like, this is beyond the pale. You can't call people the N-word on stage because you get really mad. Nobody supported that. But I think the issue is that cancel culture is more broadly applied to like a wide array of ideas that are like, some of them are pretty socially popular. So I would say like a lot of the red pill stuff, say like Andrew Tate, for instance, or a lot of the stuff that Donald Trump was saying. I feel like in 2016, there was this really weird phenomenon that happened where Donald Trump got on stage and he said a lot of insane shit. And there was a lot of people like me in the country, liberals, who ostensibly thought these ideas were eliminated from society. Nobody really believes this stuff. Nobody would say this stuff about Muslims, about Mexicans. Like, this can't be the case. And then he won the election. And I think that was a big wake-up moment. It was like, okay, I don't think we've done enough to actually change people's minds on a lot of these ideas, but instead we become obsessed and fixated on the canceling and banning from all the platforms. And what we've done is we've created this like second world where all these people are living, and none of them are actually being persuaded out of the like insane shit they think.
So pretty much what you're saying is that the effect that Trump being banned from Twitter doesn't really work, is what you're saying, right?
Not too much. I don't feel like it.
No.
Or it might help to curb the individual a little bit, but I don't think it does anything for the overall ideology.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you not say that a lot of the ideology, would you say that Trump was more a symptom, or did he spur the ideology himself? And
I view things as a push and pull, with him largely being a symptom, but also being a little bit of a push as well. So symptomatically, like, our country existed in a way that allowed Trump to exist, and then once Trump exists, he pushes a little bit and makes it a little bit worse, right? So I don't know if our country would have accepted January 6th before Trump, but with Trump in office, that becoms more acceptable, basically, yeah. Well, a bit of a push and pull.
I think it is still effective to like be able to like deplatform people, those types of individuals. It is effective in the sense that once they lose their voice, they're unable to spur those ideas, encourage people into proliferating those ideas. I think it is pretty effective once you cut their voice and those ideas are no longer able to be voiced, then it does have an effect on like the overall culture.
It can a little bit. So this is kind of like the thing that I'm scared of is as we move more aggressively in this direction, you're starting to see people getting bigger on these alternative platforms where we have no reach. So Rumble is a really good example of an alternative platform. Parts of YouTube can be a good example. And it feels like what's happening is this kind of like canceled crowd. It used to be like the intellectual dark web. Now it's like Joe Rogan and friends and all these people. They're getting larger and larger. And I feel like we're going to hit a breaking point to where you can't just ban and censor these people anymore. And they're going to have all these platforms to talk on. And now you've like completely lost the ability to communicate with them. You said you did IR, right?
That's true.
Have you, did you follow when we talked about cutting Russia off from SWIFT?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, I'm not an international relations guy, so this might be really stupid. But one thing that's really scary from my point of view in cutting Russia off from everything, including SWIFT. Now, they didn't get completely cut out of SWIFT, right, for transaction-related energy. But the scary thing about cutting Russia off from SWIFT and then everything is that what if Russia could survive with just their little Eurasian community and they were totally fine? If that happened, we'd be in a really weird position in the West. We're like, okay, Russia's actually okay despite all of our sanctions. Now they can operate completely independently from us, and we have like no leverage whatsoever anymore on them. And I worry with the cancel culture stuff that's going to happen, that like these alternative platforms will build up and someone will be like, okay, I don't believe in vaccines, I hate trans people, minorities, and I'm going to go make a living over here, and I'm actually fully supported and okay doing it. I've got my Black Rifle Coffee sponsorship, I've got my Rumble stream, my whatever platform, and now they're like untouchable and unreachable. And that's like the scary world I feel like we're headed for. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's that's a pretty good point. The case with Russia, I think it is, of course, a little bit more different because I think the intention with like being able to, like those economic sanctions and stuff like that is less to be it's more to cause like a domestic disruption. In the case of making Putin have like less support domestically for his policy.
But what if Russia could survive despite all the sanctions and completely cut off from SWIFT?
Well, I don't think that was the original intention at all. Because I don't think anyone, when they cut SWIFT off, they knew Russia would survive. They would just be a lot worse off, and that's pretty much the only. I'm pretty sure that was the only real.
The goal, yeah.
The only
but
real
if they
goal.
grew to be like relatively stable independently, even a little bit worse off, like there might be some people that would consider that a success in Russia, right? Because now they no longer have to worry about any demands from the West because the West has.
If they're able to go in completely independent.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Like how the UK wanted to be independent from Europe after Brexit, right?
I mean, that's difficult to say because there's a lot that goes to like saying that like it's effectively impossible to be completely independent.
Sure.
From one way or another, you'll need help from an outside source.
Sure. Well, China, right?
China, exactly.
Or India.
But that being the case, it's very much true that like over a long enough period of time, any country is able to adapt to a conflict.
Yeah, which we don't want, right?
Which we do not want.
Yeah.
But the goal is that the conflict ends swiftly.
Sure.
Which is a hopeful measure, but
and I feel like that's kind of been my issue with the cancel culture stuff, is that like we've been pretty aggressively trying this for probably like 10 or 20 years on certain things related to racism and stuff. And when Trump came out and he said certain things, like comments that he made about like Mexicans and stuff, in my mind I'm like, you wouldn't hear this stuff in the past. Bush wouldn't say stuff like this. Reagan wouldn't say stuff like this. Like this stuff we're way past these types of statements. There's no shot. But he said it and people cheered, and I was like, it feels like there's a lot of people in this country that we're doing a really bad job communicating with because we just assumed we could like cancel and shame those ideas out of existence, but they're still there.
I think that's an interesting point. Just to go back on like the idea that like cancel culture itself is, I agree. It's a reactionary. It's a reactionary like I guess reaction. But
reactionary movement.
Yeah. But. And like it is true that like but I think it's like a different scenario because the fact that they have these alternative platforms that they can go to is what is allowing them to spur their voice onwards. I think, do you think if they had no platform whatsoever, if that was even possible, would the issues still be inexistent?
I mean, I think people will find a place to voice somewhere their disagreements. But that question of like, what are the platforms disappeared? That's even scarier to me.
That is
American. Like, I mean, it's democracy. We should allow some different strains of thought. But I think the scary thing for me is that like, as these people get pushed off and pushed out of these arenas, we start to lose like challenges to our own ideas. And I don't know why this happens, but there's a phenomenon that when you lose the other side, your side will just tear off in like this more extreme direction. And to some extent, we need, as much as I hate fucking Trump supporters, they keep you honest. Like they keep you grounded more in conversations. We've seen this happen a lot with, we can say with the lab leak stuff, to where initially, I think the lab leak stuff, I think conservatives presented it in an insane green light, as an intentional bioweapon created in a leak, blah blah blah. But it probably caused liberals to respond a little bit too extremely, where they didn't even want to consider the possibility. I know a couple articles have been written about maybe liberals were a little bit too hasty in dismissing lab leak, and now we've got more questions about it. I still think it's probably a wet market thing, but we don't know. But those people with those questions will exist, and if we keep like shooing them off, not only do we not address their concerns, we also don't know as much about our side. Like I've learned a lot about vaccines and COVID and immunology just from studying to have to debate like anti-vaxxers and stuff, which I think a lot of people don't know.
So you're pretty much is saying that like cancel culture. Would you say that cancel culture is undemocratic?
A little bit. That's a rough statement though, because like technically shouting somebody down is an exercise of your democratic freedom of speech. Like you have a right to censor people to some extent. Like if I don't like somebody on Twitter, I can block them or not work with them if I choose to. I just feel like we take it a little bit too far sometimes. Like there are certain speakers that I probably wouldn't share a platform with, but I don't know if I would say like you're not allowed to have the platform at all,
And that's that. And you're saying that's like cancel culture?
Yeah, I think it's too far. I think we should be able to, like broadly speaking, we should be able to have uncomfortable ideas that we are forced to confront, maybe on a college campus or maybe on a platform that we're able to deal with. Because I just feel like there's too many examples now of like these ideas coming out and people have no idea like how to even deal with it. I think a really good example is the Kanye stuff recently. A lot of people I realize don't have any idea how to deal with like anti-Semitism that's rooted in a little bit more factual conspiracy, right? When somebody starts saying things like Jews disproportionately control the banks and media, and it's like, okay, that's kind of true, but then nobody knows what to even say about that, and it's like, oh shit, you haven't spent any time addressing the arguments.
Okay, then how about this? Do you think that some people are more immune to cancel culture than others?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
And do you think in those cases where with the people that are less immune to cancel culture, do you think that it's effective? That cancel culture is effective on them and not so much to like the bigger names like Trump?
I mean, it could be effective on them, but it also causes like weird externalities relating to it too. Like there might be, like for instance, people might have more radical ideas and they're actually willing to let on because they're worried about cancel culture. I think that's probably not good. So for instance, in some college campuses, conservatives might not be as comfortable like voicing opposition, which I think is damaging for all of us because one, for the left-leaning students in class, they don't get to hear the opposition, and then two, the conservative doesn't get to have like a good conversation about that opposition as well. So yeah, I think cancel culture can be more damaging to people that don't have like the alternative platforms, but then I think it kind of robs all of us of like better understandings of the issues and better conversations about the issues.
Okay, so in the end, cancel culture pretty much roots you in like a dogmatic like thought. You don't really question why you're
somewhat anti-democratic. It makes you more dogmatic, more ideologically driven, more partisan.
It's pretty much speaking without thinking. Like is that what you're thinking?
That would be part of it, part of the issue. Okay.
Well, I don't really have too much else more to say about it. So
okay. Well, hey, listen, I appreciate the conversation. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So originally the sign that attracted me was the Nazis belong on campus sign.
Yeah.
I would honestly disagree with that, but I want to know more because from the conversations I've been hearing from you, it doesn't seem like that you necessarily fully agree with all the points. It's just like it's like an attention grabber.
So I agree with that point. I do fully agree with the point. So my point of view is that college is the last place where you can be critically challenged, and you can be critically challenged in a really unique way because you're old enough to have those thoughts, but you're young enough that you're not like out in the world, and hopefully you can't permanently destroy your life. Although with you guys, that's changing obviously from since when I was in college. So I would say that like college campuses are good places to have like a very challenging speaker come. And when I say challenging, I mean like somebody that might be like a far right fascist, authoritarian, Nazi, Groiper, whatever these guys are, because I think it's a good place to be able to have conversations with your friends, conversations with teachers or professors or TAs in your clubs. That is like a good place to hear like this guy says that Jews are disproportionately owning like banks and media, which is true, but now he's saying that they're trying to push an agenda on us and destroy society for white people. Is that true? I don't know. You go back to your clubs and you have that conversation. I think it's better to have it on college campuses rather than you graduate and then you're just kind of like thrown to the YouTube algorithm to see what you wind up with later on, and you don't even know how to combat those ideas. That's kind of my viewpoint on it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll say like I somewhat agree with what you're saying that we should have these kinds of conversations. I think that these conversations, as long as they stay respectful, are very healthy for the mind. But I will say like I want to ask like where would the fine line to be where it could be a safe conversation versus something that could turn violent from either side, because violence does come from both sides?
I think that it's up to the faculty to figure out how to do it, not the administration, the professors and stuff. I think it's up to them to figure out what they think is the best way to do it. Violence is possible, but I think violence is part of the cost of having freedom of speech. We can say very radical things here. You might inspire people like the Buffalo shooter. You might inspire, riots during BLM. You might inspire, the violence can be inspired by the freedom of speech that we have here. But then on the trade-off, we have the ability to say and do a whole bunch of things, to create crazy media, songs, all sorts of stuff that could only happen in the United States, really. That's just part of the trade-off, and understanding that early on in college, I think, is important. That freedom of speech is really important, but there are trade-offs to it. We get to say a lot of cool things, but there's a cost as well. That it could be violence, and I think faculty should decide how best to deal with that without just banning all of it. Yeah.
Do you think that people who are responsible for those violent costs through their speech should be punished, or do you think it's just the people who enact on the violence?
I think that it's very hard to do. When you talk about holding people accountable, I would say that in the United States, I err very far on the side of caution of not doing it directly, unless it's like a hold on, I just lost my train of thought. When you're talking about direct incitements to violence, those should always be not okay. But when you're talking about people that are saying things that might eventually lead to hurtful things or harmful things, I think that should probably be allowed, because it's part of the freedom of speech we have, in the country.
I can agree with that 100%. I think as long as you're not inciting it 100% and telling people hey, these Jewish people did this on our campus and we should all attack the synagogue or something like that, versus saying,
yeah, and that would be not
I'm a Jewish person
sure.
as well, so versus saying hey, these Jewish people have taken control of this, I don't like them, whatever, sure. I'm not going to let that affect me. But if it's a personal attack on a place that I worship at or something like that, then
yeah, direct calls to violence, I think, should always be bad. But general speech that could lead to harm, I think Tucker Carlson. Have you ever heard of the term stochastic terrorism?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of conservatives engage in that, but I don't think it should be outlawed or banned. That's just part of our freedom of speech. I would argue that people like Tucker Carlson engage in that type of speech, and it sucks. But we should be able to address it or counter it. Yeah.
Okay. And then I also saw the other signs cancel culture doesn't work.
Sure. On the same vein as that, yeah.
I would honestly also agree with that statement 100%. I don't think cancel culture has done any good for anybody in society.
Yeah.
I think that it's really just media that blows it up, that a lot of people see it more. But cancel culture has taken away a lot of free speech and a lot of freedom for other people, to where I think a lot more right-leaning people have to be more cautious of what they're doing. Yeah. Especially the ones who aren't in the 1% with wealth.
Yeah. I feel it feels to me like whoever's in power wants to the other side's freedom of speech. So right now, I would say that the left is predominantly in control of a lot of the social medias and everything. So they're trying to over all the conservatives. But when the conservatives were in power, they didn't want gay people in movies or any of that shit too. They wanted to over the left as well. It just depends on who's in power where. So yeah, but I think we should be a little bit more accepting of somebody might be a Trump supporter, but he can still work in an office with people that aren't, or somebody might be have some kind of extreme points of view, but it doesn't mean you have to destroy their life or something.
Yeah, obviously 10 years ago when this wasn't all a thing, people could work in peace and disagree with each other politically. Now it's just getting out of control.
Yeah. It feels like it. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I'm a little bit more conservative leaning, and sometimes I feel uncomfortable to tell people because I just don't know how other people will react to it. Yeah. Especially at a more liberal campus like this.
Yeah, especially being Jewish, I can imagine. Because depending on who you're talking to, a lot of weird Israel questions might start popping up really quickly. Shit gets really crazy.
My parents are both immigrants from Israel, so
okay.
I've been called a brainwashed motherfucker by 16-year-olds. I've been called a child killer, even though I've never
killed a child.
Never killed a child.
That's good. Okay. Congratulations.
Not in the military there. I was born here, so
yeah. Okay.
But yeah, no, I've been called some pretty nasty things for that. And I can agree that cancel culture is really relating to that and enabling people to want to say those kinds of things and not
feel justified for it too.
Yeah, feel justified and not feel open-minded to hear the opposing side.
Yeah, which I would agree is a bad thing. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good one. What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. I guess let me first ask, like, what are your views? I don't know too much about your channel.
You just came here to talk about my views in general.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a curious guy. I'm from
okay.
DC. Hear a lot of like.
Okay,
different
cool.
stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I generally, I guess, I would consider myself like center left to far left socially. I guess it depends on who I'm talking to. But one of the things I push for online is that people from different political ideologies need to have like real conversations with each other, but they have to be like real, like critical conversations with each other. Because it seems like either one, nobody wants to be open and talk to the other side, or two, all the people that say that they want to be open and talk to the other side are just conservatives in disguise, and they don't actually like want to talk to anybody. They just want to like parrot like conservative anti-establishment talking points. So yeah, I'm kind of here as like I'm a big establishment shill. I defend government organizations. I defend our democratic organization of our party system and all that. And yeah, but I like to talk to different people and show that you can have conversations with Nazis and progressives and socialists and fascists and everybody, and that's what I do. Yeah.
No, I find that really cool. I back during Corona, I was like kind of finding out my like political ideology, and I think it lines up pretty close with what you just said.
Okay.
I would like. At first, I kind of started grinding on Omegle, just like roasting the shit out of like conservatives.
Okay.
And then I kind of found that like conversations were like the best use of my time, and kind of ended up, center left and whatnot.
Yeah, that's basically my journey. If you follow my stuff from like 7 years ago, I was like the like online left debate bro. Like I was very debate heavy, very scream people, call them retarded, shut them down. And now over the past few years, I kind of mellowed out, and I'm a little bit more try to be empathetic and understanding of where other people's political viewpoints are coming from. Yeah.
That's weird. I guess. What was this? The cancel culture doesn't work.
Sure.
What's your view on that?
So my issue with quote unquote cancel culture is I feel like instead of like trying to tackle challenging ideas in a critical manner, we're kind of relying on these other systems, especially private ones, to just get rid of all the uncomfortable viewpoints that we don't want to deal with. So rather than learn how to have difficult conversations with people that we disagree with, we kind of look to like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube to axe out the conversations that we don't ever want to have. And I feel like this is leading to a growing pool of people like gathering and congealing in these other areas, and eventually those areas are going to get big enough that they can make a living over there and survive. And now we've like totally cut off a whole section of the United States that we're not willing to talk to or have conversations with anymore. That's a really scary idea to me.
What do you think the difference between cancel culture and just like public reaction is, I guess? Because that's always been like a big line for me, because I've always kind of viewed cancel culture as like not real, and then it kind of became real. And
Yeah, no, I agree. There's like, it's hard. There's like lines where I think are acceptable. So like if you go online and you start tweeting some wild shit and your friends are like, I don't really want to be your friend anymore, I think that's fine. I think that's okay. I can understand that. People get into arguments even with family members and Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners and everything. Like, I understand that. I guess the issue I have is people seem to want to go like to the max whenever somebody disagrees with something that's even a little bit part of like the progressive dogma or whatever we would say, whatever is like the dominant like cultural prevailing narrative right now. And sometimes it feels like too extreme. So here's like an example I'll give. It's going to be hard to draw an exact line, but like, let's say that you're hanging out at a party, a college party, and let's say that like there's a bunch of white kids and they're all like saying the N-word and they're talking about like.
Wait, I got a story.
Go ahead.
I transferred from URI. That was like every night I was just like bumping rap. They would just like say the N-word next to me. It was pretty goofy.
Sure. Wait, when they were doing what?
And then we were just like chilling in dorms. They would just crank the N-word.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
insane.
And let's say that comes out and there's like a backlash at your school. There's disciplinary action. I think that like for that, I think that's probably okay. That's understandable. But there was the I don't remember which school this was. There was a white girl who was in a car, and I think she just got her driver's license. And I want to say she was 15. And she said something, oh, like, look, I can drive now. And then she said the N-word with a soft A on Snapchat. Yeah. It was a stupid thing to say, but she's like 15 years old, white girl, stupid shit, right? Yeah. There was a student that saved that video and waited a few years for her to apply to college. And then once she got in, he sent that video to the college.
Yeah, that's
holy shit. That's extreme to me.
Yeah.
Or like the people who are like, I don't like what you're doing, and I'm going to try to get you fired. I'm going to try to get you banned from every platform. I'm going to try to get you delisted from everything. I think it goes a little bit far. I don't know like where the exact. I guess it's hard to say like what's too far, what's not far enough. But like when people are digging up stuff that people said like 10 years ago, when people are trying to get people fired from their jobs and shit over like political speech, I feel like that's a little bit extreme sometimes, and I think it leads to an unhealthy environment where people are like afraid to like even speak out like different political views.
Yeah.
Especially when the definition of like fascist is like anybody that supported Trump, I think it gets a little scary.
Yeah. I honestly like everything you're saying, I'm I'm kind of agreeing with. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, well, you were supposed to come up here to disagree with me, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just like, I'm also center left. I really don't know what to say. I mean, like,
Okay, well.
yeah. It's been nice talking with you.
Okay, well,
I don't want to like dry up.
No, you're good.
the
You're good.
show. It's
Okay. Yeah, well, hey, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, have a good one, man.
I saw the whole thing with the what's it called, like the whole Nazis.
Nazis on campus, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of see it like, I don't know if I would necessarily disagree. I mean, yeah, Nazis are bad, but it's like a sort of act of futility trying to like, how to say, ban them in the sense of like in our current era, if that makes sense. Because it's like, it's one thing if it's like after a World War II, or after like some political unrest, there's a fake concern, right? But the Nazis, or at least what we consider like neo-Nazis, they don't hold any power, right? Isn't it that more like a concern of like, I guess, what they would act on, right? I think that's probably the bigger concern, right? Not necessarily for the ideology only.
I mean, yeah, I kind of understand what you're saying, that like there were times in the United States where you might want to ban political parties because it's like right after a war or something, and you're worried about like enemy state. Yeah, sure. And we are pretty removed from that right now. Yeah. I think my biggest fear when it comes to banning like politically extreme ideas is we're getting to an area in society where we're not able to speak against them anymore. Like people aren't able to put up like rational arguments against like anti-Semitic ideas. And then what happens is when somebody gets confronted with an anti-Semitic idea, they completely freeze up and then they just like walk away and they have nothing to say. And I feel like when you have an environment that you create like that, you foster the perfect environment for like a new extremist or thought leader to come up and capture all of those people because you are willing to talk about the uncomfortable things. And then you get like the new Andrew Tates or the whatever of the world that show up basically.
I find it interesting with Andrew Tate before. It's like before, this whole thing, I've heard of him before. Like,
make sure you speak as close to the
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Like, I heard of him before, like in 2016. I was like part of that. Like, I was terminally online. And I was like in middle school and high school. I saw like what Gamergate did. I was like, I got out and I was saying like, what the was this, right? And I says like, I heard Andrew Tate. Like, I heard this kind of like very like some like terminally online drama, right? And I thought, okay, it's just like a bygone era, right? Kind of thing. And that seemed like pop up like a year, like last year, right? And I'm thinking like, how the hell is he getting so many people, especially like kids my age, when I was like middle school, high school, like saying objectively, I think worse shit than I did, when I was like when they were their age, and it's like, I remember thinking like, is it like stuff like TikTok or something? Because it's like, I mean, I grew up on like Reddit, on like YouTube, so.
Yeah, and I feel like when it comes to people like Andrew Tate, the issue is people think that if they ban the person, they kind of get rid of the idea. But there's still like, if somebody like Andrew Tate was able to become that popular, it's because there was that group of people that would have allowed for him to do it. And nobody ever really addresses any of the things that he talks about, which I think are challenging things, right? He says some important things about women. I would agree. I would agree that he says important things about women, but people aren't really interested in responding like full on to the things that he says. They'll just like cut like a 5-second clip, say that's horrible, and then move on. But for all the young boys that are listening to like the totality of what he's saying, nobody's addressing any of their concerns or anything. Yeah.
That's a big issue. That's what happened with the whole Gamergate stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, I remember seeing it, and then like, I sort of saw people, like after I was like, oh, we should probably be engaged with not necessarily with the, Andrew Tate, but the people who listen to him. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. And then I saw Andrew Tate, come again, more or less. And then I saw the same people, say, no, we shouldn't engage with like the people who like listen to him. It's like, you're kind of creating another Gamergate issue, like has this, it sort of feels like history is repeating itself now. And so me being like a part of that kind of thing, like I'm saying like, instead of like being on the side of where like being affected with it, I'm saying like how other people are being affected. It's like, why,
Yeah, and it's frustrating that nobody wants to talk to those people. So like when it came to the Gamergate stuff, basically if you were on one side of it, you were just labeled like a sexist, a racist, a misogynist, a hater, and then like nobody actually addressed any of the stuff relating to any of the people involved in the Gamergate stuff. And I noticed for like the Andrew Tate stuff, it's similar. Like people say, oh, I like Andrew Tate. Like, oh, you're a sexist, misogynist. So it's like nobody even talks about any of the things he's talking about. And when you do that, all you're doing is creating an environment of people that are just waiting for the next Andrew Tate to come up and go follow him and listen to him. Yeah.
I think the difference though is like more or less with the whole.
What? Oh, yeah, hold it closer.
Oh, I'm sorry. With the difference in like the whole Andrew Tate and I think Gamergate is like the thing is with Gamergate, I remember it was something like of what was like, some sort of like ethical concern journalism, like in gaming journalism or whatever, but like it evolved so fast. I don't remember if it was what it was really about. And it's like, and I hear like, when I ask people to like explain it to me, it's like, was that the actual thing, or was this like?
Do you know who Zoe Quinn is?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's like the thing is apparently like what I remember is like saying like she got some favors over from like a Kotaku or whatever, right, to review her game. But then I look at it's like saying no, she didn't. It was like entirely someone else. It's like.
basically we live in a society today. I'm sure it's always happened, or maybe it's different because of the internet now, but we live in like a society today where everything becomes like so immediately political, and it all gets wrapped up into these huge movements, especially after Trump, where it's like, if you believe, like, if you're like a fan of Andrew Tate, you're not just a fan of Andrew Tate. You believe in like the Matrix, you believe that like, you know, the feminization of men, you believe that Trump is the best leader, you believe that the vaccine is evil, you believe that Russia should win over Ukraine. Like there's all these political ideas that you're immediately brought into just by having one thing. That definitely happened with Gamergate a bit too, where it wasn't just about Zoe Quinn. Anita Sarkeesian got wrapped up into it. The whole feminists and gaming and like all of this, like it became about everything. And then like Gamergaters became like Trump supporters who became like politically affiliated with like far right extreme. Yeah, it's like this crazy thing.
No, and like the whole thing with like the whole Ukraine war and like that whole political thing, you know, I think what kind of scares me, it's not as people are against it or like, oh yeah, like we're going to turn this into another Afghanistan, but for Europe, you know, like, I mean, I think it's just more just like a whole political thing where it's like, I mean, I'm Pakistani, so the Pakistani, like, you know, CIA equivalent, the ISI, they supported Taliban because they were allied with the United States during the Cold War, right? And they more or less made sure, like, to, you know, make sure keep communism out of Pakistan and like also that region, right? And after the Soviets fell and just left Afghanistan, the Taliban, you know, took over. You know, it's been a mess for Pakistan this whole time because it's really hard to control an extremist that's next to your border because you're trying to use a geopolitical pawn, right? And with the whole, you know, Ukraine war, like, yes, I do think, you know, we should support Ukraine. It's more also this kind of concern where it's like this unbridled, like, okay, we'll give them all the money or whatever, like this sort of like, how do I fear? It's like, I say, it's like early on, I was afraid this was going to be like Europe's Afghanistan almost, you know, because it's like, you know, it's like Russia it's authoritarian, right? But it's also at the same time like, even though I support Ukraine, it's a concern that it becomes into another Afghanistan, right?
Yeah, I understand that, but then even the Ukrainian-Russian war ends up being like people jump into these really hardcore political narratives. Like when I hear somebody say like Russia should win the war against Ukraine, I'm like, well, why do you think that? And they're like, well, because Russia doesn't have like gay people in the military. I'm like, what the fuck? What are you even talking about? Like everything is like so insanely political in terms of where everybody's at. Don't let my speaker get wet, Sean. Okay, thank you. But we're kind of far from where we were, but
I'm sorry.
Wait, no, you're good. So I guess to reiterate, I think political extremism should exist in college campuses to some extent because you want to have those discussions on campus where kids can like critically dissect and analyze the ideas and learn how to speak against them rather than just throwing them to the YouTube algorithm or the Rumble algorithm or Gab or Truth Social or whatever else and seeing what happens, I guess.
Is actually like the whole like I guess conservative social media stuff like still a thing? I mean, like
I have no idea. I don't know. Where are we at on Gab and Truth Social? Parlor?
Okay, I mean,
it's it's floating out there. We'll see.
I mean, people love that are like a negative engagement on Twitter, especially on Twitter. Like, holy crap! Like, what was that screenshot where it's like a person says like, "Oh, I like waffles, what about pancakes or whatever?" I swear, I see that happen. Not even political ones, even like, and I'm a big smartphone guy. I love like the consumer electronics. I see that happen all the time with that stuff. You know, like. Linus Tech Tips, they got hacked by a Tesla scammer, right? Yeah. And a person saying maybe for the marketing, since they all use all on like clouds, like server, like software, they should use Chromebooks or MacBooks. And you see a bunch of PC guys going insane. And it's like, like, listen, I'm a PC guy. I love PC, but it's like, listen, a marketer, you're not gaming. You're not doing anything that uses like software from the 90s, right? You don't need Windows for that.
Yeah. Or it's like if people like Xbox, they have to hate PlayStation, or like it's always this dumb shit. Eh?
I mean, I like Sony stuff. I just don't like PlayStation, though. Sure. You know, and it's like it's like I think it's even past politicalization of like politics. I think it's becoming the whole culture war stuff has like just expanded to everything, and I don't like it. It makes browsing the internet miserable.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, I don't know. I think this kind of like whole thing where we're having these kind of like debates or like extremists, should they be on here? It's like the issue's not the like I guess being on here, but it's like this kind of like thing of like how out of control will it get, right?
Yeah, I guess I guess the ultimate goal that I wish people would realize is the United States really only works because we don't really have like an ethnic, like you're not like American ethnically, right? We don't really have a long history, right? Because we all came over, or a lot of us came over from other countries and shit. So so the things that bind us together are things like our adherence to democracy, that we have a lot of different types of people here, and I wish that people were able to exist alongside others and be able to have like intelligent conversations with them rather than getting mired down in these like relentlessly political circles where we have to fucking hate every side and we don't understand what anybody's saying about anything.
Yeah, I see. I mean, like, how do you think how we got to this position, honestly? Because I think it started in the 70s or 80s with the kind of, what you call, like, I mean, I don't know, like, what do you think, how we kind of got to this place?
In my opinion, that's a way deeper conversation, but I would say that in my opinion, I think that the internet has changed things a lot. You've got like these very sophisticated algorithms that are driven to like getting you to consume a certain type of content over and over again. And you've got like the ability to target people and get people in communities where they don't have to talk to their neighbors like more than ever before. Like, you know, a long time ago, like if you were to fuck toasters in a neighborhood, everybody would look at you as like the weird toaster fucker. But nowadays, you can probably go and find a forum like dedicated to finding like the best toaster to fuck. You have like 10,000 other people in this community, and you feel like every, you know, relentless affirmation for these beliefs. I think that part of the internet has enabled us to find more extremist opinions, people that agree with us, and never have to actually confront or deal with people that live different lives than us. And, we live in these realities where people are totally different.
Okay, so what like stuff, I guess, from like maybe pre-internet era, like I guess say like Reaganism's like GOP, right? Like that stuff, whatever that taken like I guess almost on steroids, like it's like the political like I don't know if I would say insiders, but like, you know, like the political elite in the country using the internet. Like I see like stuff like, you know, our Congress, like I'm in IT more or less, and I see the whole Congress with like Facebook and stuff. Like it's very frustrating because it's like that whole like the Congress asking questions, it's for one like, you know, cultural shit, and it's like, you know, to jab points, like to have people think, oh yeah, I'm doing my job, but it's like it's a bunch of old grandpas not understanding how the internet works, you know.
Yeah, but I mean politicians are old. What are you gonna do?
I mean, not fair. Not
yeah, we need new younger people in there for sure.
I mean, true, but I feel like the whole lobby thing, it's like how to describe, it's like your grandpa, you know, and you try to explain, and IT, I'm more or less that guy who has explained that to your grandpa, and there's no IT guy in the Congress. If not, it's probably a lobbyist, and it's very infuriating. Like social media, like they should be banned off of like the government phones because it's a government phone, right?
Maybe yeah.
You know, there could be some dangerous stuff. I mean, you know, there's exceptions like marketing or PR. That's a different story though.
Okay.
But like I feel like, you know, it's just kind of like, I think it's also with our business culture where we use like business assets as personal, which isn't bad. I don't think that's a wrong thing. But when there's like a security reason, that you shouldn't be doing that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, anything else?
Yeah. No, not really, honestly. Well, thank you for talking to me so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it, man. Have a good one. Well, what'd you come here to chat about?
Okay, so I guess I'll just start with the first topic that we had.
Yeah, go for it.
Which is real men should be more feminine. I just want to hear your perspective first.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. We should have like a more prompt, because I feel like I repeat a lot of the stuff I noticed through these. So when I look at women over the past, like probably especially 20, 30 years, really since the 60s, it feels like women have done a really good job at going from being very feminine. And when I say feminine, I'll say like staying inside, taking care of children, being nurturing, providing for a household, to encapsulating a lot of traditionally masculine traits via two huge things. One is access to reproductive control. So that means abortion and the pill. And then two is access to the job place. They can work jobs and make their own money. So because of this, women have access to things like sex without needing to have a husband for it, and they have access to jobs, meaning they also don't need a husband. So women have kind of like done this thing where they've grown from being just caretakers to also subsuming a lot of traditionally masculine roles. Today, you have like this big red pill movement where, you know, people are trying to figure out like, oh, how do we get women what we need to do? And all the red pill guys are like, you need to be more masculine, more masculine, more masculine. But it feels like women have a lot of kind of the traditionally masculine traits kind of covered. Like you can't really capture a woman with a paycheck anymore because she can work. And it feels like a lot of things that guys need to work on today when it comes to relationships. This is heavily anecdotal, but it has to do with things like communicating really well, being emotionally responsive, like just being a mature person to be around that can serve as like a good like somebody that would be like you would be friends with them, not just relationships. Okay. Yeah. So when I say men need to be more feminine, what I'm saying is they need to take on a lot of the roles that traditionally were just for women, things like being communicative, like being emotionally intelligent, and they need to incorporate that into their psyche now, since women have incorporated so many masculine traits. Yeah.
So to you, men are not already emotionally intelligent enough to be considered.
Men are emotionally retarded. Can I say that here? Yeah, men are very, very bad, I think, with a lot of that stuff.
Okay. And that's just a general statement of like what things you've observed, right?
Yeah, generally, yeah.
Okay.
And then when I look at things like red pill stuff, if I think, because I know a lot of women, I talk to a lot of women, I'm involved in a lot of hookup culture and everything. If I talk to a woman, like red pill stuff, like Andrew Tate or whatever, these are like the biggest red flags ever. I've
Yes.
never talked to a woman before who's
Yes,
like, I just need
as a woman.
Yeah, I need a
Yes.
guy that's really into Andrew Tate. I need a guy that's really into like the red pill. I've never heard a woman say this ever.
not.
And then to the contrary, now I get emails from some women who are like, I'm really worried because I was on a date with a guy and he used like the phrase like high value man, and I'm worried that he might be like into this stuff. And then,
Right.
and then I've had one email from a woman who said her relationship fell apart because of it. And these are just like emails, I guess. So, you know, maybe not, but
You know,
yeah, just random things here. Yeah.
Right, because I think I just wanted to ask, because I was like, what do you think is a feminine like trait? Because like honestly, okay, I see this again as a woman and like having experience with other people. Yes, I think women are significantly more emotionally intelligent. I think just because of the level of maturity and also like their perspective and understanding of the world is just different because we've been, I would say, arguably oppressed. And I think that's continued into modern society. I think the fact that like me being the president of Bridge UMD was like a question for people. They were like, oh, you're the president. Why is there no male? We have no person who identifies as male on our executive board.
Sure.
So it's like, it was one of those things where I was like, I wanted to know what you thought was femininity and then like talk more about, that perspective.
Even for things like even traditional things like feminine roles in like the household. So there was, I should remember the study and the name, but there's a study that asked the question of like men breaking up with women who out earn them, and it happens pretty often that when the woman out earns the man, a lot of these relationships end. But one of the things that was reported was the amount of household work that's done in relationships where the woman out earns the man. The woman is still doing the majority of the housework.
Right.
So men have a really hard time stepping into that position of like, well, if you're going to out earn me, at least I'll take care of things around the house. Like a lot of guys can't even do that. And then there's a lot of concepts. I don't know if you've ever heard of like weaponized ignorance.
Yes.
Yeah, where you know a woman will be like, "Can you do the dishes?" And they'll be like, "I don't know how to," and it's like, "I'll try it," and they like break all the dishes in the dishwasher. Like, "Oh, sorry," you know, like dumb shit like this. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I feel like I've seen that firsthand. It's interesting because both my parents are immigrants. They immigrated from India before I was born. My dad actually does a lot of the housework. He does the laundry because he's very anal about how we do it. The dishwasher is his arena because he's very particular about how things go. And I think my parents have set that example of like, there is a balance
Sure.
between like the roles of a woman and the roles of a man. And my mom has worked my entire life. So it's not like I've ever seen a stay-at-home mom, but it's like, it's interesting because I feel like I've seen a rise in people who are like, you know, stay-at-home moms, and they're like, oh, here's what I do in a day. And it's like getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to take care of their child. And they never show a husband or a partner or like a spouse being there to help with that. And I'm like, is that a feminine trait to be the one who is instinctively responding to
I think
the needs of someone?
I think it depends. Without getting too deep into that, I don't know how much I honestly believe things like nurturing or like gendered. I don't know if I believe. I'm sure
Right.
there's like a little bit of
Like the biological aspect of
Yeah,
it?
I'm sure there's like a little bit of it, but like I have a son. Like I wanted to care for my son. Like when he cried, like it made me feel bad. Like it's not like, oh, my kid is crying. Like I don't give a fuck. Hopefully his mom takes care of it.
Hormones were like, no.
Yeah, no, like that's crazy. But the I do think it's when we talk about like traditional roles, if there's like one person working, like if the husband traditionally is working and the mother is like taking care of the child almost exclusively, whatever, I think that sometimes that delineation of work can be okay, because like one person is like earning money for the household, the other person to take care of the household. It just depends on the amount of work being done on both sides, right? Like if a husband is working like a 9 to 5 and he has nothing to do with the house, and then the wife is like taking care of like 2 or 3 kids, that could probably get a little bit grating sometimes, especially depending on the ages. But yeah, I think that figuring out like a fair and equitable distribution of like roles in a household is really important. There are a few TikToks that blew up where I was arguing with Just Pearly things about that over the doing chores in the household. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think it's one of those things where it's weird, because I feel like a lot of men that I know will look at doing housework as a chore and not like a thing that they have to do.
Sure.
Like, and I think for women, it's more of like if this doesn't get done, we're not fulfilling like a space that we need to do.
Sure.
But I'm just like, what would make a man more feminine? Like, would it be, is like taking care of a home just like inherently a feminine thing?
I mean, the words themselves, the problem is there's a lot of normative baggage to a lot of these words.
Yeah.
So if you say it's feminine, it kind of sounds bad or
Yes.
derogatory, I guess.
It does sound
which I think
derogatory,
I think actually goes to show how interesting our views of gender roles are. I notice this in a lot of red pill spaces, that when somebody says a man is acting feminine, like it's basically an insult to compare a man to a woman.
Right.
That's how you insult a guy. You throw like a girl, you're bitching like a woman, you sound like a
Yeah, or real men don't cry.
Yeah, but I mean, like I would just say, like traditionally there are like we have like feminine roles in society. Traditionally, we've got masculine roles in society. Women have kind of like done a lot of the masculine roles now, but men seem unwilling to do any of the feminine roles. So when it comes to entering relationships, I think as a guy you have to think of like, well, what's the value add here? If all I can provide is like a paycheck, but women can work, I'm pretty in the dating market, and it feels like a lot of people that are giving like dating advice on the red pill side are unwilling to acknowledge that hyper masculine shit only works if you are like the top 1%. Like if you're just bringing a paycheck to a relationship, it's not enough. If you can bring like a $500,000 paycheck to a relationship, it'll probably work. Or if you're like, you know, a 6'4" shredded alpha chat or whatever, maybe. But for the vast majority of guys, that's not going to be enough. You're going to have to work on those other traits that women have traditionally worked on.
No, I mean, that's fair, because I think like my biggest question when I saw the topic was like, our definition of femininity and masculinity is like inherently rooted in a historical oppression of women, right?
Sure.
And like I just wanted to know your thoughts on that, like on the progression of that, because I think as we've come into what we would, I guess, arguably call modern society, we've seen a progression, but I don't think it's really that's like, I don't know that you would
I think
consider
it's pretty significant.
significant. Obviously, it's different.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like as we've, let's say like from the 2000s to today, like what would you say that progression has been like, or at least as you've observed? Because I feel like obviously you've observed more than I have.
Well, I mean, for a while we almost had Hillary Clinton as president, right? She won way more votes. So, I mean, that's a pretty big deal, I think. I think there was a lot of talk in my lifetime even of like people, when Obama ran for president, people were saying like, you know, a black man will always be president for a woman. We're still really far from that. I remember people like Rush Limbaugh, Michael Savage. I used to listen to a lot of Republican commentators when I grew up. But yeah, they would talk about like, we'll never see a woman as president. We almost did. So I think that's a pretty big deal.
Okay.
You're starting to see when it comes to education, women are slaughtering men, which is a problem that we probably are going to have to address at some point. But I don't know how to even have that conversation because people freak out.
That is, that's a conversation.
Yeah. There are still some areas that women haven't made too much progress in, or that much when it comes to like computer science, like computer related things.
Yeah.
There's arguably a lot of like culture around that in video games and computer gizmos and gadgets that are geared more towards men, and maybe that's why. But yeah, I think in a lot of ways, women have made a ton of gains positively in society that I think have dramatically changed the role that they play in the world. So much so now that like when you talk to these red pillars, like, well, if you want to find a good woman, you need to go to Eastern Europe or South America or whatever, because they can't handle, you know, Western women in the United States or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Because apparently we're too modernized for them.
Yeah.
Or less of the traditional.
Yeah, it can't be captured with a paycheck.
Right. Yeah. No, that's actually I'm enjoying that phrasing. Can't be captured with a paycheck, because I think it really does speak to a lot of things. Because like as someone who is ace, like I never see myself in that type of relationship. I'm self-sustaining, I think, in that sense.
Sure.
And I actually do really appreciate that you were like what can a man bring to a relationship with a woman or with someone else?
Yeah.
If they're doing something that a woman can do alone.
Yeah, which is really difficult. For a guy, the answer is easy because obviously sex is a big thing, but there's also a lot of emotional intimacy you get from women that you don't get from men.
Right.
Like when a guy will go into like a group of guy friends, and this guy might be like 2 days from suicide, and people are like, "What's up?" And he's like, "I'm cool."
Yeah, everything's fine.
And that's it. And then he kills himself 2 days later. Like, okay. And then a woman will go on a date and, you know, come back and like, "Oh my God, like I did this and he did this and I felt like this and it was blah, blah, blah." Like the relationships that women have with each other tend to be a lot more emotionally deep and more communicative.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's also interesting because I think I have really good friendships with both men and women. And I think my relationships with all the female friends in my life were definitely like more deeply emotionally attached. And I don't know if that's born out of like the fact that I've known them longer. Also, like it also stems from the fact that some of them were childhood friends. Like I've known them since I was crawling.
I think men want those relationships. It's hard to foster with each other. And then you run into this weird thing where I've talked to a lot of women who their first date with a lot of men will literally be like trauma dumping. Like, oh my gosh, somebody's here finally to listen to me and all my problems, and I want to communicate everything. And it's like, holy shit.
We're too emotionally mature. Now we're just monsters.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, definitely very interesting. But I think that was pretty much all I had, I guess, to come and yell at you about.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, thanks.
But yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, have fun. Good.
So the topic that we're talking about is the Nazis should be allowed on campus. And I would like to make a clear distinction. Like, obviously, you know, you can have like Nazi-esque views and like you can talk about them on campus and stuff like that. But you have to also understand that like people have the right to like say, hey, that's really stupid. In fact, like people do say crazy shit like that. It's kind of good because like, especially when it like gets caught on camera, stuff like that gives it bad exposure and people are easily able to say, hey, that's kind of bad. But we both know that that's not kind of how like Nazis operate. They kind of like are on the down low. They're like, oh, like they can deny certain aspects. It's like, oh, you're a racist, you're a Nazi. No, I'm not. You know, I'm here about trying to promote, you know, Judean Christian values, stuff like that. And so I have a certain experience up here at State College my freshman year. I was, you know, like red pilled, you know, Trump cap wearing kind of guy out of high school. So like I was like trying to explore myself politically. And so I met this group of guys who were called the Bull Moose Party up here at Penn State.
Okay.
And so like on the outside, it appeared that they were like some kind of like libertarian group. And they're like, oh yeah, Bull Moose Party, Theodore Roosevelt, based, awesome, great. So I go to one of the meetings, and I see a guy that I recognize. He's a part of the college Republicans, and they're the entire time they're giving this guy shit. They're giving the guy from the Young Republicans all this shit. They're telling him that he's, you know, race traitor, everything. I was like, holy, like, first meeting, immediately they're already like, you know, mask off kind of like racist kind of shit. Like they asked me for my 23andMe score, which I was like kind of like, I told them I was Irish, and they were like, you know what, that's passable, that's permissible, like that's not haram or anything like that. And I was like, oh my god, like holy So I go, and the guy from the college Republicans pulls me aside. He's like, yo, I know that you're like, you know, coming to our meetings and stuff. He's like, yo, you need to like
Speak on the microphone if you can.
Oh yeah,
Just make sure.
He's like, yeah, no, you need to like know that these guys, they're Nazis, and like we're trying to like do stuff to like get them shut down. So like eventually he's like, yo, they don't know who you are, they don't know what you believe, you should go in, get names, write down the crazy shit that they say, come back to me, and we'll see what we can do. I was like, okay, cool, because I was like just got off watching like Black Klansman. I was like, damn, I'm gonna be Adam Driver, man, like I'm gonna yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It was crazy. But the thing was, like, I eventually learned like that these guys were like carrying weapons around campus. Like these guys were like going off campus and like putting up caricatures of like black people, Muslims, Jews, and like shooting at them. Like it was literally like from the freaking movie. Like it was actually insane. And to me, it's like when those people exist on campus and they believe those crazy things that they do, they're more likely to commit acts of violence. Now, granted, group doesn't exist anymore because of the fact that, like, you know, they're getting school funding and they're essentially committing hate crimes. Like literally right here, Old Main, one of the members was holding a Nazi flag, took a picture and submitted it to a larger group chat that the group was a part of, and that was kind of what them in the end. So that being said, like they're not existing anymore, but of course, you know, groups that like sponsored the Gavin McInnes event here up at Penn State, you know, you cut off one head of the Hydra, two more sprout up. So I just wanted to know what you think about that.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to the college funding groups, I think that they can have a bit of deference in terms of who they're willing to fund. Like, I wouldn't expect a college to be allotting funds to an actual Nazi group. Like, I think that there are probably things relating to probably protected classes in the United States where it's like, we're not going to give money to a group that's like, we only allow white people here, or we only allow Asian people here, or we only allow whatever, or like we're discriminating against certain like religions or other types of protected backgrounds like that. I think that's probably okay. One of the issues that I have when it comes to college campuses, though, is it seems like that mentality also extends to like speakers that groups might want to invite on campus. So if you've got like a certain type of group that wants to invite a speaker that might have said things in the past, or maybe ostensibly even holds some type of Nazi beliefs, I do think that that type of speech should be allowed to be platformed or brought on by another group. I think the biggest issue that I have when I look at kind of the big intolerances that are pushed towards very divisive speech, very extremist speech, especially on the right, is it feels like people lose the ability to learn how to handle it, like how to have discussions about it.
Sure.
And I feel like college campuses are the best place for that to happen. Like there are two places essentially where you can kind of like get this type of view, and it's either going to be like on a college campus where, you know, like Milo Yiannopoulos or Gavin McInnes or some other or further right extremists are going to be invited on to have a discussion, or you're going to see it on YouTube or in a Discord chat or with your friends. And I feel like having these types of conversations on campus where students can go back to like teachers and professors or in groups of students to like have discussions about it is a lot better than like you're just surfing YouTube at night and you catch some guy and you're like, wow, this guy's speaking a lot of facts,
like
and then you go further and further down like this rabbit hole of like horrible stuff. So yeah, I think and I also think that with recent stuff that's happened culturally, like especially with Kanye West, like he says a lot of insane shit, but nobody really knows how to address it. Like if you walk up to, like, you can find, you know, an average progressive or far left person, like, do you think we should have, you know, like far right speech on college campuses? Like, no, that's horrible, it's bad, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, do you think that Jews hold like a lot of positions of power in the United States? Like, dude, they'll tuck their tail and run. They can't even have that conversation. They don't even know how to begin to address it.
I mean, but like you could say that about any ethnic, like, you know, there are a lot of Irish people in media, and then it's like, okay, well, like there's like a logical follow through with that statement. Like you can't just say it and then be like, ah.
No, I understand, but the point is, I don't think people know how to respond to it. Sure. And then this happened with the red pill. The whole red pill movement is what happens is if you have, especially like a group that's holding power, kind of like culturally, which I would say like the left kind of has a lot of cultural power right now. If you're unwilling to address an uncomfortable truth, as soon as somebody comes up that is willing to address it, not only will they have the ear of the people that are listening to them now, well, now now they have their hearts. Now they're like, okay, well, I'm going to tell you that Jews run society, and I'm going to tell you what we need to do about it. And people are like, well, these guys don't even acknowledge that fact, and these guys are speaking, truth to that. Now we're going to follow them to the ends of the earth. And I think that's, when I look at like the red pill stuff, I think that's where a lot of that came from. A lot of people aren't willing to talk about like men's issues and stuff, and then all of a sudden these guys pop up that are, and now they follow them like off the edge of the earth.
You need to, what there needs to be is just like a group of people who are able to acknowledge all of those problems whilst also having a point of view that isn't like far right leaning, at least. And I agree, like, to the fact that, being able to hear somebody say something that is like socially and like morally reprehensible, and like, you need to hear it in order to
be able to critically analyze it, right?
And in your mind, you need to be able to construct like a way to prove that it is incorrect or that it's wrong, right? So in that sense, yes. But I also believe that when you say Nazi, right? If we define Nazi as somebody who holds the beliefs of someone like who's an actual fascist, not like somebody who we disagree with, or somebody who might be center right, or somebody who's a little bit more far right, but still ultimately is a person who does not support, like fascism or not, like, Nazism, like that's absolutely, like, those people are fine. Like, there's no issue with those people. And even if they do say stupid shit, like, they are held accountable ultimately if they're able to get a time to speak here. Because now thinking back on what happened with Gavin McInnes, like, that kind of was like a bad thing for the left here at Penn State. Like, it's like I hear like the chat around town, like after it happened, and all the conservatives were like, yeah, man, that just proved him right. Like, they're just trying to silence him, which, if they just let him speak and just say the stupid shit that he says, obviously.
Yeah, and then address it.
Yeah,
I guess
exactly,
because I feel like I've talked to Gavin couple times. Yeah, Jesus.
The sign is a really controversial statement, but then it's like talking to you, it's like, okay, yeah, no, that's a really normal take.
I think that's part of the issue, though, is that like I think that a lot of people do think. I feel like, as part of like a greater buy-in to democracy, like there are costs to freedom of speech, and one of those things is that reprehensible views can spread to some extent in society. But I think that's part of the buy-in that we have with our system of governance. As we've said, an average guy, 27-year-old guy that works at McDonald's has just as much power to vote for a leader as a billionaire. You have the exact same vote. Both of you can vote 1-to-1 on who the next leader is going to be. And if we've made that agreement with our citizens that everybody has a vote, and you can vote on whoever you want, I feel like it's important to be able to have really challenging, critical conversations about points of view that might be really uncomfortable, like people being very far right, or people being racist, people being anti-Semitic or whatever. And we need to have the ability to talk with it and understand why it's wrong, rather than just take it for granted and hope that like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter are the defenders of freedom and they like ban all the talk that we don't want.
It's not bad because I said so. It's bad because I've come to the logical conclusion that it is. Yeah. I mean, like, and then there is something to be said about the people who use this idea of freedom of speech to kind of like take away accountability for the things that they say. They're like, that's the fucked up part. Like, man, they took to Twitter and now they canceled me for saying X, Y, and Z. Like some, again, like socially.
Yeah, freedom of speech isn't freedom from consequence.
Exactly.
We just have to be careful what that consequence is. Like, if somebody wants to not associate with you or ban you from a platform or whatever because of something really reprehensible you said, depending on the thing, I can understand that.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be like, well, you said that you were a huge supporter of Donald Trump and whatever, and now I'm going to throw, like rocks at you because I don't want to hear you speak and everything. That's probably not an okay consequence, right? Yeah.
That's not like what I mean is like people using their so I use my freedom of speech to say something. You have your freedom of speech to say something back, and you don't have to be nice about it either,
sure,
right?
Yeah, I agree.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Throwing rocks, that there can be like legal repercussions to that, and I don't know if you meant that in a more.
Well, I'm thinking of like the Richard Spencer. Was it a bike lock? The guy walked up and hit him.
No, I think they just punched him. I think they actually just.
Was it? It might have just been a punch. Yeah, I don't know. There was a bike lock incident. I don't remember which one that was, but yeah.
One trans activist, or I don't know if it was a trans person or if it was just a kind of a more skinny young lad who like did like the turnaround,
the flip
during the abortion debate. Yeah, no. So again, like, no, acts of violence is terrible. It happens on the left, it happens on the right. I don't know. I feel like acts of violence normally do come from the right, which is where my not only from lived experience, but from, just like what I see on the media and stuff. You see far right protesters, they're the ones who are patrolling around with,
sure, or big like shootings and the Buffalo shooter and everything. Yeah,
exactly,
for sure.
Right? So, but then again, that doesn't, you can't make like a large, swathing statement just because, one psycho, got off of 4chan and decided to go.
You also have to be careful where like your cultural levers of power, I think, are still predominantly on the left. So like it's very easy. So like here's a statement we can say, right? I'm pretty sure research shows that most of the violent acts that have been committed in terms of like attacks and everything have come from right-wing people. I think over the past since 9/11, I believe there's one big study that looked at this. I don't remember if this is an ADL or SPLC thing or whatever, but that ignores everything that happened in the BLM riots.
Yeah.
But then the issue you come up against is not so much that like for the rioting that happened during BLM, I would say it's bad, obviously. But the problem is people on the left will defend that and they'll say, well, no, this violence is righteous, this violence is justified.
Justified outrage is like a term.
And then you run it. There's that MLK quote of "riot is the language of the unheard," ignoring the fact that MLK was massively against rioting. And then you run into these issues where it's like, well, violence for me, but not for thee.
Right.
Yeah, and then you're in a really fucked headspace. Yeah, I don't think it's good.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, mob violence is also different from a single individual, who posts like a manifesto online and because like these mob, like it's more property destruction than it is like actual like commits of killing and stuff like that, which we can both agree is. You can always replace like a glass window pane.
Kind of.
Right?
I mean, be careful.
Yeah.
There are some blacks that were like destroyed. I think there are some places like in Kenosha that are still like completely shut down forever. Yeah.
Like there was like a Wawa in Philadelphia that got destroyed, like absolutely destroyed. Now I don't know if that was a BLM protest or an Eagles game, but like still, like what I mean? Like that's absolutely true. But again. For me personally, the value of a human life outweighs the value of any kind of personal property. It's still damage and it's still an act of violence. I would still call it an act of violence, but certain acts of violence are worse than others. But that this isn't even what we're here to talk about. So
okay,
yeah.
Anything else?
I got all the points I wanted to talk about.
Well, good luck. Are you on track to graduate next year?
Yes, I am.
Good job.
Hey, nice meeting you.
Yeah, have a good one, man.
Curious about the sign you got with the gender thing.
With the gender thing. So basically, my broad argument is that women in the past 30, 40, 50 years have taken on a lot of traditionally masculine roles, especially related to sex, because they've got reproductive freedom and work. Like they can work jobs now and earn money, and because of that, when men are coming to relationships now, we need to offer more than just a paycheck and the ability to have sex with a husband and like have a kid. So we have to like do a good job at becoming more emotionally intelligent and taking on traditionally female roles like doing housework and stuff. Like these are important things I think for adding value to a relationship with a woman that a lot of men don't want to confront today. Like red pill spaces seem to be inundated with just be more masculine.
Yeah, no, I mean like I do agree with like the rub of like, dudes need to learn how to be more emotionally available, have like better emotional skills. And also I think that in general, like people are not learning how to like be in healthy relationships until they fuck up a couple of really bad relationships. You really do not know how to be good at it until you really cause a lot of harm to yourself emotionally.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing? Probably not.
But I mean, there's going to be some learning period for relationships. That's fine, right?
Yeah. The one thing I disagree with is like, what is the point of hanging on to these ideas being gendered though?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I would care that much, but as it exists today in society, we have like pretty gendered views of like roles. I guess for historical purposes, it's important to say masculine versus feminine because there was that separation of traits historically, right?
Yeah.
Masculine is working, providing for the family. Feminine is working in the house and taking care of your family. So in terms of analyzing it like historically, I would say that like men need to take on more feminine roles because traditionally those have been the roles. But I mean, like in modern society, I would probably say we shouldn't gender these things. It's kind of stupid too.
Yeah. I mean, like, I guess what I'm curious about is would you consider like, do you think that society needs to move towards like a less gendered system in general or reforming masculinity?
That's a really hard one. So something that I think is a bit of a mistake is to dump all the traditions of old in favor of kind of like this kind of like postmodern, disorganized, like no hierarchical, no organization. I don't know if that would work well. I think there's probably a lot of old concepts that have a lot of power in them that are explanatory, that give us guidance, that are probably important to us. Gender might be one of those things that having some sort of different gendered view of like men and women like gives us some kind of like rail to be on, to ride our little subways on. It helps us like organize the world and make sense of things. And I don't know if it's easy to just toss all of that.
I'm not saying it's got to be easy. I mean, like I would say that like a lot of people just struggle. Like, I'm not even just talking about like the like transgender people, but I think everyone kind of struggles with gender at least a little bit in their life.
A little bit, but I think gender probably also gives you a lot of good feelings too. There's probably a lot of like good gendered, like even for trans people, right? The idea of like gender euphoria is something we talk about when they're expressing correctly.
I might get flack for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyways. I do think that cis people also experience gender euphoria as well.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, of course. Yeah, if a guy like goes and if he's lifting at the gym, you got a huge fucking pump. You look in the mirror, you probably feel good about yourself. A woman in a really nice dress, really whatever, might feel good about herself. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess what I am curious about is like, do we really need a really like an institution of gender to still access those like positive feelings and those positive effects? Like, is it really
Personally,
necessary?
I mean, like, I think no, I don't care that much, but I think a lot of people do. I kind of view it similarly to some extent like religion. I'm a very big atheist and I don't like religion. I think it's cringe. But there's a lot of value that comes along with the institution of the rituals associated with and the community building aspect of religious movements. A lot. And I think tossing all of that has been kind of harmful for society. You don't have like a central place where you gather every Sunday to meet with community members, get some sort of moral leadership. So yeah, there are going to be things where like religion, I would say, is cringe, but there's a whole lot of external value that's provided by a religious movement. Same thing with probably concepts of gender too. There's probably a lot like packed in there that kids can immediately identify with that make them feel good about themselves and everything.
No, I mean, like there is, I think, a tension, especially when it comes to marginalized people. I mean, like, I'm non-white. That's really all I can say.
Okay.
And there is like a tension between like, okay, it feels good to like have an identity. It feels good to be like, okay, I'm able to find community in some of these things that like I identify with. Like, I like being a dude. Like, dudeness feels pretty good.
Sure.
Like, how do I not like harm people with it?
Mm-hmm.
And like, is it possible to like move past a system of gender, but also still maintain like those positive effects? And what I also disagree with is like, I don't know, I know that you consider yourself like the enlightened.
Obviously.
One thing that I know comes with that is I know a lot of liberals and a lot of people that are focused more on electoral and like more like this also goes for like hardcore Marxists as well. Purely materialist politics are not good at critiquing or reforming things that have like social power, and this would be that. So
potentially, yeah. I mean, it's an important thing to talk about. Like, liberals will fixate on like hyper individualization, and then sometimes can go down kind of these weird consumerist paths, where it's like acquisition of material goods is supposed to make you happier, and everybody needs to be like their own little island. When in reality, like, there's going to be some social organizational concepts that probably make us feel good about ourselves, like gender or religion or spirituality or stuff like that. Sure.
And in the same sense that like you are supposed to like we're. I've watched enough of your stuff. You are a dude.
Yeah.
No, we're dudes.
Sure.
There are expectations of like being a dude that like, no, you're supposed to follow it.
Mm-hmm.
If you do, feels good, right? And being rich and having possessions is also one of those as well.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I am confused about is like, you say you don't really care about gender.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really care about like these systems. So then like, what do you do about it if you don't care about it?
I mean, it shouldn't bother if you truly don't care, right?
That's true.
I don't mind guys having really gendered roles or women having really gendered roles. I guess like in my ideal world, the gendered roles would still exist. We just wouldn't judge people so harshly for not following them. It's like if you feel like a lot of euphoria from like getting shredded as a dude or from accomplishing something, I guess whatever would be traditionally feminine, having a family, taking care of their family as a woman, like I think that's great. But like if guys want to do the nurturing thing or if women want to do the bodybuilding thing, I think that's great too. It's just a little bit non-traditional. I don't think having the categories is bad. It's just when people get really judgmental of people that don't rigidly adhere to the categories that it becomes bad.
I agree with more or less all of that. I mean, like, I'm curious as to what you'd say about this. I would consider myself a gender abolitionist.
Okay.
I'm not sure, like, would you agree with that?
The only issue I have with gender abolition is it seems like there's a lot of people that get a lot of like good feelings from gender. So it feels hard to want to like just toss that category completely. That's the only thing I would say.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know. I like hitting the gym. I like picking up the heavy things and putting them somewhere else. It gives me a lot of serotonin, and that is a gendered thing. But like, I'm still gonna enjoy it just as much without it being gendered.
Sure, but would everybody? I'm not sure.
I don't know either, but also
It feels like one of those categories that's existed for it's like religion. Like there's probably some part of our brain that's wired to like want that particular thing. There's some space in our head that gets filled with really good feelings when it comes to worshiping a higher power, when it comes to having these like gendered expectations, that it feels hard to strip all of it and expect every single person to be on board with that. There might be some people that are okay with it, but it feels like in general they're probably pretty guiding for people. But it's just my feeling on it.
that's fair. And I mean, like, yeah, no, there, like, you do still have gender euphoria that exists.
Yeah.
I honestly, I'm having, because I know this is supposed to be like kind of a debate. But
Sure.
I feel like
I mean, sure.
no.
Yeah, it's okay.
yeah, that's fine. Do you particularly disagree with anything I'm saying? I could definitely bring up some takes you're not going to agree with, but they're not related to
Yeah, I mean, you can come back up later if you want. We'll see if anybody wants to say, yeah. Cool.